Why do people buy stuff in Genshin? Is it because they like the characters? Is it because they want to get stronger? Is it because we're all crippling addicts? Maybe. Well, that's what I wanted to find out, so I opened a survey to ask Genshin Impact players what makes you pull for a character. Welcome to Aster's Labs, where I study you, the Genshin Impact fans, and what makes you tick. And welcome to a survey on the relationship of Genshin Impact fans' interest in the game and their purchasing behavior. This survey was open in April 2024 to May 2024, so keep that in mind. Anyway, here are the results. Disclaimer. While the numbers could be representative of the population, I do want to preface that the attitudes found in this survey is based on cold, hard numbers rather than the subjective and individual experiences of people. Just because a lot of people answered a certain way doesn't make the answer objectively correct. So let's begin. This survey follows a more complex structure than my previous one, but much easier to analyze. The first part just asked the usual demographics of the respondents. I wanted to know who I was working with and what's their general area in the game. So I asked for adventure rank, frequency of playing, and when did you start. Then I asked about your general interests. This is a general overview of player interests about the game rather than the character. So this includes answering how interested are you in combat, slice of life events, the general lore, exploration, and character building. It's also so that I get a good feel for the people that participated in the survey. Then the main chunk of the survey comes in what parts of a character are you interested in. I took it upon myself to search up some articles on what constitutes a character, and I basically took all of those features and asked players if they considered them when they pull or not. Then I also asked if you consider their gender, clothes, origin, facial features, personality, and even their main stats, gameplay kit, and drip marketing. I tried to be as exhaustive as possible so I can get the best results, but obviously this is a survey that might not have encapsulated everything that could have made a character. Then the next part is asking how much have you spent on Genshin Impact. Now, the previous section could include free-to-play players and whale players, but this one just gives a great view of who bought what in Genshin and how frequently you buy them. I asked how many banners ago did you dedicate your primos to a character, what have you bought in the last 3 patches, and if you're willing to buy for the sake of a new character. Then in the last section, I asked if you're satisfied with Genshin's pulling system. Are you satisfied with the 160 per pull? Are you happy with the pity system? Etc, etc. All of these combined make up my variables, and that's basically the whole survey. So what am I looking for? So unlike my previous survey that was pretty straightforward, this survey is more so concerned about what kind of things affect how much you purchase, what you purchase, and how often do you purchase them. So I did another layer of analysis. There's this neat quantitative method called regression analysis that lets you see how one variable affects another. Basically, you take one independent variable, meaning the thing you have, and then ask what its correlation or association with another variable is. The affected variable is known as the dependent variable, and then when you do the results, you just get a number from 0 to 1 and positive to negative. If the number is positive, that means when your independent variable goes up, so does your dependent variable. And if it's negative, there's an inverse relationship. Now, another neat part of this is that I get to make inferences about the population. You know that question you have in a survey of, is this enough to show the whole fandom kind of thing? Well, there's also a quantitative method to doing that if it's significant. If it applies for the survey sample, it most likely applies to the bigger pool of players. Granted, it passes a certain test. Now, obviously, this isn't perfect, but it's a fun little thing just to see the people's perspectives quantified into neat readable charts. So let's begin with the results and the discussion. Majority of the players that answered the survey were around adventure rank 60, with the second cluster of 40.5% being in AR51 to AR59. So you can see that these players aren't exactly unfamiliar with the game. Everyone started around the same year, 2020 to 2021, so we're going to get the opinion from generally seasoned veterans at this point. So now we go on to purchase behavior. How much do the folks answering the survey spend on Genshin? Well, it's not actually a lot. Around 50% of the people who answered the survey said that they have never purchased anything. The Welkins was the most purchased item, which isn't really all that surprising. What is surprising though is that out of the population, people bought the 1,980 pack more than the 3,280 pack, but more people bought the 6,480 pack than either of them. And for some reason, I always assumed that the pack buying would be lateral. Like if you start from 60, climbing up to 6,480, the people buying the packages would just slowly get smaller as it gets more expensive. But I was actually super wrong. People rarely bought the 60 Primogem pack. I don't know why the psychology is always to just go for the biggest pack possible, but can someone try to explain this in the comments? When the higher the pack price is, the more likely it is for the person to actually buy it. And mind you, this is $100. Anyway, I just found that attitude really fascinating. The general purchase behavior of the respondents are relatively low. A majority of them said that even if the character that's coming up is someone they were waiting for or anticipating, they're not really all that likely to buy a Welkins, a Battle Pass, or a Primogem pack for them. Seeing it in numbers, it actually makes me realize that there really is a massive divide between the whales versus the number of dolphins and free-to-play players in a gacha game. So now that we have the purchase behaviors of our sample, it's time to try to understand why they buy or why they don't buy. And that's when I asked these players what are they most interested in. I'm not really surprised that considering I did show this to my audience, general lore of the game takes the cake as a section with the highest interest. But combat actually comes in really close with an average score of 2.47 out of 4. I guess everyone just appreciates a good whacking. I mean, we are playing a combat game. Now, what about the question of what do players most consider when they pull for a character? But surprisingly enough, a character's personality takes the cake as a thing people most consider when they pull for a character. Which I'm not too surprised about. I'm more so surprised that it beat out the more combat parts of the game by a big margin. And I'm actually super surprised that visual element isn't that big. But maybe it's because the sample size is very interested in lore, so we're just going to have to see if that's consistent with the rest of the results. I don't really know what kind of personality Genshin players want, but I guess it also plays a big role in how people connect with these characters, especially since Genshin Impact is a very story-heavy game. I also went out of my way to ask how much do people consider when they pull. Like if your friends are pulling, if content creators are pulling, or if online folks are pulling, and the general consensus is that the sample could not care less. Which is a really good mentality to have, no FOMO, please. Then finally, I asked around how satisfied they were about Genshin's pulling system based on how agreeable they found several statements. When I asked if they think that the 160 price for a pull is fair, the general consensus is that it's alright, to a slight disagree about the topic. This is also the case if they think that the number of primos we were getting per patch was reasonable. So it's not really new knowledge that people think their money isn't being well paid off by in-game resources. But the answers become more neutral to agreeable when asked about the soft pity and the Welkins. Surprisingly, people felt that the Welkins was reasonably priced, which was around 3.63 out of 5 rating. And that's really high. I guess $5 for 30 real-life days is seen as a good investment, and definitely better than the one-shot big shot of just buying a pack. But another one that was honestly surprising for me was that they found that the soft pity limit was fair and reasonable, with a good 3.08 over 5. Around 33.3% of the respondents agreed with this statement, and 32.8% are neutral. I honestly expected that the number would be much lower. I personally always found the 70 to 75 was way too high for a game that gave patches that barely got that wishes. So I'm shocked my opinion is in the low minority here. I looked into this a little more, and I think it's just because that Genshin's pity is industry standard. Some games usually have around the number of pity and soft pity, so I guess everyone, especially if this isn't your first time playing a gacha game, would be pretty okay with it. But after that, it's finally time to answer. What affects purchasing behavior the strongest? So first is the general interest and buying frequency. And based on the results, the more interested you are in Genshin, the more likely you are to buy them, logically. But strangely enough, despite lore having the highest number of people that are interested in based on the respondents, it's actually character building, location exploration, and combat that have the strongest relationship to how frequently you buy. I guess it just shows that gameplay mechanics are still king when it comes to people considering who they're paying for. Which kind of makes sense. The probability of you buying most likely means that you're also interested in C6ing them or just getting their constellations or getting their best in slot weapons so that they're the strongest they could possibly be, which is basically combat. Now, I'm not saying that lore players don't do this, but it is for the mechanical side of Genshin rather than for the story itself. This is also the case if you're willing to buy stuff even if the character featured isn't what you're looking for. The numbers show that there's a good possibility that if you're interested in playing the game in general, there's a chance you're going to buy the Welkins as an investment for future patches. Heck, some people even buy the biggest Primogem packages even if they don't like the character featured. It's low, but there's a good chance that if you're already a whale, as long as you're interested in min-maxing a character, regardless of how interested you are in them personally, then you're still gonna buy. Next is character considerations. What part of a character has the strongest reason for people spending money? Surprisingly enough, there's not as strong of a relationship when it comes to what people consider in a character and how frequently they buy. And you'd think that the character would be the forefront of why they buy something. A character's gameplay kit and facial and body features have the strongest relationship on why people frequently purchase. And why I think the numbers reflect this is because if you already like a character, the odds of you buying are actually much lower, especially if you're a casual player like 50% of the respondents. My theory is that if you're already considering a character to be your favorite, then the odds of you saving up for them in previous patches through free-to-play currency removes the need for you to actually buy something, which is interesting. So even if there is a high consideration of a character's individual traits, it's usually not enough for people to buy them. Like, just because you're pretty doesn't mean people will spend on you. You need to have other aspects like a good kit, a good personality, and good marketing, which means that characters that do get really high sales on their banner can technically be seen as great all-arounders that really spark the audience's interests. Not just because they're hot or new, but because they're well-designed characters that the audience resonates with. This is also emphasized that people are rarely a reason that players spend money, with the social aspect of Genshin like content creators or friends having a strength less than 0.10. So the idea that FOMO is big in Genshin isn't all that massive from a social perspective, which makes sense since this is a single-player game. And because of rerun banners, limited time slots are now not that big of a consideration when you buy them. You either just save up now, and if you don't get it, it's more likely that you'll accept your fate and wait for the rerun rather than buying a pack. And now, this is the most important part. How willing are you to pay if you're not satisfied with the system itself? When I was reading up with some literature, I had a hypothesis and a few guesstimates about what the results could be. And I thought that even if players aren't satisfied with the system, the characters should be more than enough to incentivize them, considering if the product is good, then a good percentage of people might still buy them even if it's expensive. Some casino behavioral studies also support that kind of thinking, but we'll get to that to another time, as well as other parasocial behaviors. Anyway, but the results are in, and clocking with a strong correlation, it's a general consensus that if the featured character isn't someone you like, then the biggest criteria for purchasing a Welkin's, Battle Pass, and Primo Gems are just the general price of the package. It doesn't matter what the character is, you're now comparing its base qualities unbiasedly with your hard-earned cash. Interestingly enough, this could suggest that if you remove the bias and subjective likes of the people, then the impact of a fictional currency, being fictional, is also diminished. We stop seeing Primo Gems and fates and wishes, and instead we see that this thing is about to cost us $100. We lose that illusion of, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be pulling for Raiden Shogun. No, I'm going to be spending $100 on a fictional character that I probably don't even like. And that is an interesting finding on disillusionment. But what about characters that you actually like? Well, the correlation between satisfaction and buying gets much higher. Price is still amongst the top considerations, but the numbers found that there is now a significant relationship for accepting that the soft pity limit is fair and reasonable, something that wasn't present in the previous one. I think it's because when you buy a Welkin so you can save up for a character, you're already thinking about the time used to save up, and it would have been worth it as long as you get the character. And honestly, you're probably already anticipating that you're going to get to the soft pity anyway, so you save up as much as you can. At that point, no matter how big the soft pity or pity number is negligible to you. As long as you get your character, you are going to be fine. That is the end goal when it comes to pulling for characters that you like. And you just need to beat the 50-50, which I absolutely forgot to put in the survey. I am an idiot. But this correlation being much stronger compared to just general interest in character likes could imply that even if you like a character, you're most likely not going to spend on them if you're not satisfied with the system itself. Even isolating the variables to if you like combat, lore, or exploration, then no amount of booty shots could convert you unless you already set out to be a collector or just like building a whole roster rather than one specific character. I always had this big assumption that as long as a character can make the audience feel good, or you can expose them enough, then they're just going to buy for them. Which does have an inkling of truth, but it seems that if you like a character, you're just going to save for them. And buying is going to be the last-ditch effort to actually get them. But that's it for me today. Now the thing is, the findings aren't mind-blowing, but that's okay. Sometimes I just want to have the numbers to back up some claims I've been seeing online, just to see if it's really the case. Though my methodology isn't perfect, that's the fun of research. You build on what you know, and realize you know nothing. But anyway, that's it for me today. My name is Aster, and thank you for chilling with me. Also, the numerical results of this study will be posted in maybe a week. I just need to actually format them on Google Docs, and I'm still in the middle of some things. Anyway, bye-bye!